Somebody complained about waiting 4 minutes, and I said to myself, you know something? I hate waiting too. So let me just fix that a little tiny bit. There we go. And we are live. It is a Sunday, Memorial Day weekend. I understand there's some race going on down in, I don't know, Indiana or something. But I figured, hey, you know something? Every now and then I just, still have to do a live stream, right? Thanks for everybody who checked in. There's a lot of people checked in early. Joshua Mullins from Lakewood, Ohio. Adam, good morning. Good morning, my friend. Of course, it's afternoon here. Lou T 1501, good morning from Shed, Oregon. It was named for Captain Frank Shed of the Union Army. Cool. I like hearing about place names like that. Go the Southway says, I don't want to wait 4 minutes, and that's why I jumped in early. I saw that, and your wish is my command. Christopher Ford, hi, Mr. Lehto. I love your videos. I've been watching for a few years now. Thank you. Thank you. And Stephen Cook is amazed. He got up in time for the start. Hi from New Jersey. Angels don't fall. Steve, morning. James von Richthofen, love your videos on YouTube. Thank you very much. I love your viewing them on YouTube. Telesto guy, hello. David Hastings checking in from Paducah, Kentucky. One of those made-up sounding names. I realize it's not, but it's like Kokomo. I mean, I realize it's a real place, but people often point it out and say, yeah, it's like being from Paducah or Kokomo or Kalamazoo or Escanaba. So Todd Gillison, afternoon from Missouri, everyone. Terrible fire. Oh, actually caught a live one. Didn't Jack Nicholson say that in the first Batman movie? Got a live one. Scott Y. Hi, Steve from Laredo, Texas. Greetings from Muskegon from Immortan Bob. Thank you for checking in. Muskegon, of course, is over here. I've had people say that I should stop doing that. But number one, I'm from Michigan, and Michigan has the ability to say, here's a map of the Lower Peninsula, and I can point to it and show you where I live. Very few states can do that with that same body part. But number two, there are people who go, oh, cool, I did not know that. So, there you go. Chaos Code, what's up, Steve? Hope your weekend is going well. It is so far, although, I will tell you, I saw a woodchuck yesterday casing my house. Now, he was over 100 feet away, but I was just kind of looking out the window, and all of a sudden I saw something pop up, and it was a woodchuck on his hind legs doing this. And he was literally looking at my house from one end to the other, and then he popped down, and he ran across about 50 feet, did it again. Clearly casing the joint. And I ran and got my phone. I got some pictures, but he was very far away. The pictures are not clear. I had to blow them up really, really big, but there's no question, it was a woodchuck. Andrew, greetings from New Hudson, Michigan. Thank you for checking in, my friend. New Hudson's where my chiropractor exists. I don't think she lives there, but I think that's where her office is. And I mentioned last week that I forgot to bring this out, but this is something that was sent to me by Chris. And this, of course, would be what would have happened if the woodchuck had gotten himself into my Viper, gotten the door open, and then taken it out for a joyride. Now, I'm not sure how he could reach the pedals. I suspect it may have taken a team of woodchucks to get that thing going, but never put it past him because, frankly, he got in my garage and was there for almost an entire day. So there you go. But thank you, Chris, for sending that in. That, of course, like I said, an artist's rendering of what might have happened, things that could have been. So Go the Southway says, yeah, if Michigan can be described by hand, then what about Florida? And that, of course, is what I was getting at. Pragmatic lady caught you from the start. Hobie Jackson, hello from Northeast Texas. Ernesto Ruiz, did you always want to be a lawyer? And why'd you pick to do consumer lemon law? No, actually, didn't occur to me to be a lawyer until my mid-20s. I started out in college studying communications. I wanted to get into broadcasting. I dropped out, bumbled around for a few years, worked in radio. And then one day, talked to a good friend of mine who was going to law school. And he goes, Steve, you're missing your calling. You need to be going to law school. And I rerouted. And when I got out of law school, I was trying to think of what I could do that would be fun. And to talk about cars all day long and practice law, that's pretty much lemon law or traffic tickets. And traffic tickets are fun, but they don't make as much money. Terrible Fire says, yeah, it's a cheeky woodchuck. And by the way, yeah, and you'll notice the woodchuck does have quite broad cheeks in this picture. I think that's how they do look, though. So, Victor Jason, hi, Steve. Mein Kampf, was your Viper stolen? No, I had a woodchuck that got in my garage, and he was terrorizing me in my garage for the better part of a day. I did a video on it about March 14th or 15th on my main channel. Then I did a follow-up on the Vault channel because I realized I had footage of me chasing the woodchuck through the front yard with a stick at about 6:30 in the morning. it was comical on some level. Scott Argyle, good morning, Steve, from the Oregon coast, Seal Rock. Hello, everyone. Natasha Nix. That's a name from the past. I recognize some of these people from the old school. David Peterson, greetings from the hill country of Texas. Mark Miller, good morning from Arapahoe County, Colorado. Sup, Steve? Sup, Mark? Helen, the Scottish llama, has the woodchuck reappeared? I don't know if the woodchuck I saw yesterday was the same one who was in the garage with me. I don't know. But I've said before, there are woodchucks on my property, but they've always kept far, far away from my house. So I don't care. I am one of these people who I want nature to exist. It was here before I was. So I've got deer, coyotes, fox, possums, raccoons, rabbits, squirrels, and woodchucks. And as long as they stay a little bit away, I'm fine. But when they start digging underneath things of mine, then we're going to have problems. Or when they break into my garage and we're climbing up in the wheel wells of my cars. Chuck Whitehead, do you have to study new car technology for lemon laws? Not really. Remember, the lemon law just says if a car is defective, has a defect, it can't be repaired after so many repair attempts, and then it becomes a lemon. And so the question is the car defective? I don't need to understand how the infotainment center works to know that it ain't working. It's kind of like you don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows. So Quentin James says, hey, from Louisville, Kentucky, where we're getting some Mother Nature in the form of stuff falling from the sky or animals. Ron Klotzer, hey, Steve, mods chat from the middle of the Mojave Desert. Thaddeus Padius says, we have a pair of Pyrenees to keep those things away. If the Pyrenees are the dogs I'm thinking about, those should keep a lot of stuff away because those are the dogs that are named after mountains largely because each of them are about the size of a mountain. I had a friend who had a couple of them and they lay down. You had to walk around them. You could not step over them. They're too large. Oh, boy. Ross Flack, Steve, I'm surprised you didn't get into communication law. That's interesting because I actually did at one point in time interview for an internship with a big radio network, and I didn't get the internship. And I always wondered what would have happened if I'd been working at this big radio network because the legal department was fairly small. And if I'd gotten in there, there's a good chance I could have gotten in and actually made a career out of it. And in that case, it would have been vastly different, I suppose. Dan Fissel, have you ever litigated a Tesla lemon law case? I've represented clients with Teslas. None of them have been litigated, meaning that they settled. But a couple. Righteous by faith. I have a Jack Russell who doesn't like critters in the yard. That's the one thing I love about animals, in particular dogs, is dogs don't know how big or small they are. You can find a Great Pyrenees that is the size of a small mountain come up to you and be the gentlest creature on earth. And you can have a Jack Russell that'll come out there. And if it's angry enough, display a level of energy that you would only expect from a Tasmanian devil. So Wayne Jensen, Pocatello, Idaho, checking in. SGB Guitars. Hi, Steve. Chrissy Avalon. Hi from Christina in Louisville, Ohio. Okay. Hey, Stacy Q is checking in from BC, Canada. Love your show. Stacy Q, wasn't that the name of a 80s artist? Stacy Q. I might be mixing up a couple in my head. Najee Abdullah, hi, Steve. Did you ever get my email about the dealership here in South Haven? That one's not ringing a bell. It's possible that it went through my spam, but send it again. I'll take a look for it. Ron Klotzer, any more books? My renter saw your book on my table. She'd had it in her room ever since. Slow reader. I do have more books. And by the way, I've got to make the announcement that everybody should have their books from now. So if you don't have your books by now, there's possibly a problem. Now, people go, Steve, didn't you track them? Yes, I tracked them. Right here are some of, and notice it goes up and over, okay? So these are the tracking receipts for all of the books, the 650 books I shipped. So if someone says, I didn't get a book, I skimmed through there, but I've only had one returned. One. And it was misaddressed because it couldn't be forwarded. And it came back and I contacted the guy and said, dude, This thing said he can't be forwarded. You must have moved. And he goes, oh, I'm sorry, I did move. I just put in the old address. So every other book theoretically is still in progress. But if you didn't get it, let me know. I'll try to figure it out and we'll go from there. David Peterson, is your book self-published? No. I just happen to have one here as a prop. And in case you're curious, why do I have this book here? Did I make a mistake on it or something? No, it's just a book. The book is published by Berkeley Books. And Berkeley is one of the biggest publishers in America. So I put out a couple books through them. I put out a couple books through other publishers, Momentum Books in Michigan, Chicago Review Press in Chicago, and so on. But I do have one book that's self-published, and I did it basically a book called The Lemon Law Bible, which I did because I knew I could push them on my channels, push them on my website, and also I give them to clients. So it's a marketing thing. John Sapola says, hail, buddy, from 93 degrees, Fort Myers, Florida, spring training baseball. I assume you mean that's where they hold it, because I think we're actually into the real season by now. Although, quite frankly, I stopped following baseball. I apologize. I played Little League baseball when I was a little kid. Loved it. I followed the Tigers for many, many years. I was even at Game 5 in 1984 when they won the World Series. I watched Kirk Gibson launch that thing at the upper deck off of Goose Gossage. Moments I'll never forget, but I kind of lost interest in it lately, and it just isn't the same. So, Michael Thacker, hey, I have that book with your signature. Thank you. Yeah, Just Noah says Stacy Q had a hit 1986 called Two of Hearts. That's what I was thinking. But it's a song I probably haven't heard since about 1987. So Tech Gorilla says, whoa, this is something I've never seen before. What a live stream? Me? What? Oh. Richard Heisey, hey, exactly. Toaster says, hello, Steve. Are you familiar with the Nelson Paint Company of Iron Mountain, Michigan? They invented the paintball, among other marking technologies. They're legendary in the paintball community. No, I did not know that paintball came from Michigan. I did not know that. I've played it a couple times, but it doesn't, somebody had to invent it, right? I know they were originally, I think, used for marking trees. So guys could walk through the woods and go, here, this tree, that tree. And it was faster than shaking a can of spray paint and drawing an X on it or something. So Valerie Ann says Susie Quattro. Stumbling in, killer. Yeah, Susie Quattro, I believe, has a Michigan connection also. Mr. Incorrect says Steve Lehto. Mrs. Teresa, 1999, confirming I got your book. Thank you. Michael Thacker, how are you liking the Cobra? I had it out a couple times this past week. Probably going to take it out today. It's not supposed to rain, but it's clouding up right now. So we'll see. Guy Lee, hi, Steve, checking in from Lindenwold, New Jersey. Love to see a documentary on your American Murder Houses book. Excellent work. Thank you. It's funny. I've told the story once or twice before. I was actually approached by a producer, a television producer from Hollywood, who said, Steve, have you ever thought about turning that into like a documentary series? I said, yeah, sure, I'd love to. And they said, well, can we pitch that idea? And I said, go right ahead. And they were taking it on and shopping the idea, saying that, we've got the cooperation of the guy who wrote the book. He could either host it himself, or we could have another host, and either I could help write it, not help write it, whatever, but they were going to do a TV show called American Murder Houses. Nothing ever came of it. So I've got a lot of these stories in my life where nothing ever came of it, but they sound interesting. Najee says, hey, Steve, can you tell us a little bit about your book? This particular book is exactly what you think it is. And there's 25 or 26 chapters. Each chapter is a different house that's still standing in America where a notorious murder took place. So think Lizzie Borden house, think John Benet Ramsey, think Nicole Brown Simpson, and 22 others. So, but the houses are all still standing except for one I made an exception to, and you'll understand why when you read the book. But I did not cover the ones where the house got torn down, like the Ed Gein house. That house is long gone. Same with, I believe, the John Wayne Gacy house, and so on. So, Margaret Riley, Steve, where can I send you a private message for legal purposes? Hoping you can give me some direction. Well, I'll tell you right now is that number one, I can only do that if you are in Michigan because I'm only licensed to practice law in Michigan. So I cannot give legal advice outside of the state. But if you want to ask me a general question, email me, steve@lehtoslaw.com. It's the same email address that you'll find if you look at my website or my YouTube page or whatever, steve@lehtoslaw.com, and I will see it and I'll get it. And if I can help you, I will. But I get a lot of requests for help out of state, and people will say, "Hey, Steve, what's the law in Indiana on the title fraud?" I'm like, I don't know, and I'm not going to start looking it up because I can't give legal advice out of Michigan. So Philip Reed says started restoring a 1979 Lincoln Mark V. Can we go after Ford for grief and how complicated the wiring is? It's funny because I think of a 79 Lincoln, and I remember when they were brand new. I mean, my friends who had rich parents probably had one, and I would never think of that as being a car that you'd be restoring. But of course, now you do the math and you go, oh, wait a second. That's quite a few years ago, right? That's like 45 years ago. So that's a classic car. And then you start thinking about how hard it is. It's one thing to pull the motor out, rebuild the motor. But if you've got to get into wiring harnesses and stuff, like all bets are off. And I feel for you. I've done some work on cars, but I've never gotten into like rewiring an old car. I can't imagine it. So righteous by faith, thanks, Steve, for your integrity and in exposing corruption in the courts. No, thank you. Thank you for watching. And by the way, I've got to let people know this. You understand that if I talk about a bad lawyer, well, there's 40,000 lawyers in Michigan. So the vast majority of them are not on my show. The same is true with courts. And I know people hate to hear me say this, but I go into courts all the time where I go, this is a good judge. This is a good court. We get a good result in here. So unfortunately, if you watch nothing but my show, you might get the impression that every judge, every lawyer, every cop, every HOA, well, maybe them, but you get the impression they're all bad. And it's like if you were an emergency room physician in a big city in the summertime, you'd be convinced that everybody is getting blasted away every single night. It's just your perception from what you see. And so I do go through the internet and the news channels and so on, looking for certain kinds of stories. And the newsworthy ones are often newsworthy because they're unusual. And so on some level, you have to understand that not all courts are corrupt. I know you're not saying that, but I want to make sure that I just want to make that point at least once. So, Tasker 66, by the way, lemon law. Would lemon law apply for a car bought in the US but shipped to Europe? It depends on what state you're in. Because in Michigan, if you buy a car here, it doesn't matter where you take it. If you bought it here, the lemon law covers it. Now, whether you're going to come back and chase it, I don't know whether it's worth your time or not. But yeah, it would still cover it. I've handled cases before for people in other states who bought their cars here. So that does happen. Michael Thacker, HOAs are a non-starter for me. Yeah, and I think more and more people are getting there too. Oh boy. Z Signier, I still miss my 3000 GT. Hello from Palm Bay, Florida. Love your channel. Thank you, my friend. And that's the thing, you sell a car and you miss it, and I was talking to somebody the other day. My first car in high school that I bought with my own money is a 1969 Dodge Charger, and I bought it for $300, which you could do back then. It was a rust bucket, needed all kinds of work. Worked on it myself, got it running. My brother painted it, looked beautiful for one summer. Had about a gallon of Bondo, maybe 2 gallons of Bondo in it. Drove it for a couple of years, and I sold it for $300. Got my money back. And so, I think people go, Steve, don't you wish you still had that car? Well, number one, if I'd still had it, I would have had to have it parked someplace and stored, and it would cost so much to do that. And so, you watch these cars cross the block at Mecum or Barrett Jackson and go, hey, here's a 69 Dodge Charger sold for $100,000. Number one, it was never in the condition mine was in with 2 gallons of Bondo, most likely. And number two, it's been taken care of and stored that entire time. So, hello, Steve. Are you going to get a Batman car? No, I don't know if it fit in my garage, first of all, because they're very long. I love the Batmobile, the original ones, and the guy at Fiberglass Freaks who makes them, Mark, who I've spoken to on the phone, very, very nice guy. They're cool cars, but to me, it's not quite that. I'd like to have a car I can drive, I do drive my Viper. I do drive my Cobra, although quite frankly, my Cobra only has 600 miles on it. I don't take long trips with it. I tool around town, get ice cream, hit the hot dog stand, that kind of thing. So, one thing I will tell you is that I get more reactions from my Cobra than I do from my Viper. And I thought I got good reaction with the Viper. I'm driving along and people are waving and giving me a thumbs up for the Viper. People are screaming at me. Love your car. Oh my God. And I mean, I'll park in a parking lot. People go, can I take my picture with your car? I've never had anybody ask to take a picture with my Viper. Never have. But I've had like 10 people ask if they can take pictures with my Cobra. And I'm like, sure. So Josh Keaton fan, but Steve, do you ever get tired of hearing or seeing that in the comments? Was it Dale Carnegie who said that the sweetest music in any man's ears is his own name? Just kidding. I don't mind. I just don't like when people talk about me in the third person. And so I just saw a question go by and somebody asked about me. And I'm reading these questions and it's like, and so I'll get a comment under a video and they'll go, Mr. Lehto, you don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, if you're posting it there, it's not personal. I don't know. Do you need to put my name in there? I don't know. On the other hand, if you send me an email about it, we could have a discussion, but we'll see. Johnny Quest, are the rumors true the RV industry put a price in your head? No, because you know why? People still buy RVs. Oh my gosh. You have no idea how many I get calls every single day and emails and messages. People go, I bought an RV, it's a piece of junk, and I just saw your video. And I go, which one? They go, the one that says don't buy an RV. And I go, wait. So wait. You didn't see my video in time for me to save you, but you're calling me now. Okay. And I feel sorry because that was weird. I'm just sitting here and all of a sudden the entire screen blanked out. So I don't know. Getting back to where I was before that happened, I saw a question I was about to answer. Joe B, in your opinion, what's the bigger issue in America, civil asset forfeiture or qualified immunity? That's a toss-up. And I'll tell you why. Civil asset forfeiture to me is so absolutely, utterly wrong that it's crazy. But so is qualified immunity in the sense the way they do it. And so I'm screaming and yelling about both of them. And in my opinion, those are the two things that I talk about with the most emphasis on my channel. And that is that I'm very, very upset by both of them. We're making small bits of progress with civil asset forfeiture. Qualified immunity is going to take a bit, although there have been hints from the Supreme Court, but we'll see. So anyway, dead air, Lewis Browning. I apologize for that. Dead air is a crime in radio, but I did not know if I was, believe it or not, I had something else pop up on my screen, which was my homepage when I log into the internet. And I was poking around and I couldn't find this screen. So I was about to crash it and start over, but then I thought, okay, whatever. Peter Green, hello from Australia. Yeah, Mr. Landfill says the screen stayed normal for us. I figured that out because what happened was I minimized a bunch of screens and found it still there. So luckily I didn't swear or anything, did I? That's my years of radio training. Is that I learned not to start cussing when things go wrong in the studio because then you discover, oh wait, the reason the monitors weren't on is because the mic was still hot. Tina Baldwin, hi Steve, hi Tina. Juan Peralta, the answer is whichever happens more often. I think it's civil asset forfeiture. Well, here's the question though. Whatever happens to you would probably seem the most important, So, John Ware says Steve Lehto is really an AI bot. I'm not. I'm not sure anybody would want to claim that. Oh boy. Bob Bong, hello, Steve from Niles, Michigan. Thank you for checking, my friend. I love that little corner of the state. As many of you know, I recently did a video about a friend of mine named Christine who passed away. I just discovered that on Facebook a couple days ago. And she ran the hamburger stand in downtown Eau Claire. And it was literally something I could see out my window. And I'd go there all the time. And she's one of the nicest people I ever met. And I was in this town, didn't know many people there, and befriended her. And she made me feel very, very welcome. Got to know her family. And I did a video about her passing and told some stories about how, how nice she was to me and how important she was to me. And I did get a very nice note from her husband saying, Steve, wanted to let you know, saw the video. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And so I had not sent it to him or anything like that, but I did get a note. So I like that. Keith Donaldson, I like that story. Yeah, and it's kind of funny because I started thinking about it. And it's one of those things, you don't think about this stuff until you literally stop to think about it. I know that's corny. But I started thinking about these stories from Eau Claire, and I realized how many of them involved her and her family because they dog sat for me. And she's also one who sold me the carton of bacon or case of bacon. I'd forgotten all about that. So AA says, will you consider retiring if the news broke that someone got arrested with civil forfeiture while being in an RV rented from Hertz, especially was parked in an HOA controlled area? Then, of course, that'd be like the whole convergence of my universe. It would almost be like antimatter or perpetual motion machine or something. Najee, would you be interested in taking a case in South Haven, Michigan? If it's a lemon law case, I handle them statewide. If it's not lemon law specifically, probably not. Send me a note, and if I can help you find an attorney, I'll try. So, Lewis Browning says he sent in the following things to the set: the Cobra Hot Wheel, the Judge Dog figurine, the Spam Bank. Oh, cool. Had a lot of people ask me where the Spam Bank came from. I said, yeah, it was sent in by a viewer. Oh, BW, are you careful not to tell everything you do on Facebook? I try not to put anything out there that could be, like my Facebook page is basically I post links to my videos, and then occasionally I post photographs of like weird animals and stuff, and pictures of my car. But yeah, I'm not gonna start, here, hey everybody, here's my social security number, in case I ever forget it. Bob Bonks, I knew your friend. She was a sweet lady. You knew Christine? Yeah, a lot of people in town did. I mean, because she'd owned that stand for a long, long time. And then about right before I moved out, she sold the stand to somebody else who took it over. And I know it's still there. I drove through there one time. I didn't stop there, though, but I drove through Eau Claire a couple times year before last. And but no one, I didn't see anybody I recognized, so. Steve Johnson, has a caseload of lemon law claims grown since you first started practicing? I don't know that it's grown. I don't think it's changed a whole lot. I think that it's going to be a situation where the number of lemon law cases you get tend to be about the same, but it's based on how many cars they build. They cannot build cars perfectly, and nobody would expect them to, but once in a while they build them that can't be fixed. So, Carter Patton, will you be doing any videos on the Ticketmaster suit? Yeah, I did a video, went up yesterday on it. Tank O Military says Spam has a museum in Austin, Minnesota. Did not know that, but it would make sense. Spam is like part of the fabric of America. This is funny how memories work. I equate spam with camping because my mom used to bring me and my 5 brothers. Yes, I've got there's 6 boys in our family, so we can all say your poor mother. And she'd take us camping. And one of the things that she would cook would be spam because you can bring a can of spam and open it up and cook it right then and there. And so that's the place I can when you say, Steve, I've been to Twin Lakes, Michigan. It's a state park up near Tri Mountain, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, the Copper Country. Ever been to Twin Lakes? I say, yeah. In fact, I can picture a lot of fun that I had at Twin Lakes at that campground. My mom used to bring us camping there. And she had one of those Coleman stoves that had the propane thing that you pump up, and she'd make us breakfast or lunch or whatever. And I remember eating spam. And that's, I've had it since. I've seen it on television, but in my mind, spam is just inextricably intertwined with camping at Twin Lakes. So, Reinhard Man says, Steve, put it on slow mode. It's been on slow mode since I logged on. I always do that. You can log in. You can post a comment once a minute. And if I didn't do that with the 543 people I've got here right now, I would start getting spam bots. And I think spam bots are run by crawlers that go out and look for live streams that they can attack. And I think if they detect a flood control, that they don't attack it, because I've not had any of those happen ever since I've been using the 1 minute time control. You can set it for like 5 or 10 minutes, but I just want it to not get insane because then I start missing everything that happens over here. 1M1A, how large is your t-shirt collection? I've got 150 over there that are in the current rotation. I've got 10 downstairs that are about to go into rotation because they came in the mail in the last week. And I've got 500 or 1,000 that are folded up and put in storage containers that I might work back out. I've been thinking that I might start 1 year with an old t-shirt and literally not duplicate a shirt on camera until I've gone through them all one more time. And then we'll do something special. I don't know. Quincy the Jelly, if I'm mispronouncing, I apologize. Hi, Steve. Just want to say thank you for the book. Glad I could finally catch a live. Glad you could drop in. Lewis Browning, spam things were a joke about how much Steve loves spam emails. Don't get me going on that. My trash can in my email is literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of spams. And every now and then a real one will come in and get thrown into spam, and I don't see it because it's overwhelmed by all the real spam. BW, nice day to ride a bike. What happens if an uninsured car hits you on a bike? That's a problem. And it's true of uninsured cars hitting real cars. I mean, people and pedestrians or anything. And so you run into a situation where just because they have no insurance doesn't mean they're not liable for anything. It's a question of you can catch them or if you get their, license plate or something. Because obviously you can sue them into oblivion because they have no insurance. So they got to pay for it out of their own pocket. But, most times I think they wouldn't stop. So, yeah, Stephen Brandt says, did you see a story of the woman arrested in Midland, Michigan that was living in the grocery store signed for over a year? I did not do a video about that. I'm not sure how interesting that is to people on the channel, other than it's just an oddity. But up towards the middle of state, it's actually closer to the Saginaw Bay City area, Saginaw Bay City, Midland. They call it the Tri-Cities. And Midland is just a little town, and there's a family fair, family value fair. I forgot what the name of the store is. And they have this sign up on the roof, and the sign has actually got some depth to it, and it had an access door on the back. And some woman was living inside that sign for over a year, just living in it. And the story hit the news, and then finally the body cam got released, and I saw the body cam footage where they went up and they knocked on the door. And this woman comes, she goes, oh, it's the police. And she goes, oh, do you want me to leave? And they're like, yes. And she's like, okay. And it turns out she had a bunch of stuff in there so she could live there. And it's unclear how she got onto the roof and back without being spotted, because you'd think somebody would have spotted that, but maybe she only came out at night. No one knows. And so we also don't know much about her because apparently they just ejected her. They didn't arrest her, and they just said, look, just leave and don't come back. But apparently, inside that little sign was a living space that was her apartment for over a year. So it was a very strange story. John Weir says, Steve, you have no idea how lowbrow we really are. Well, what I'm getting at is I really don't know how much more I can tell of that story than what I just told you. And I want the videos to have some substance to them. So like, I'm not going to come out and do a story that's 30 seconds long. I was thinking about doing grab bag videos where I was going to take all the stories from one week that weren't long enough to make their own video and just going boom, 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 boom through them. But I don't know how fun that would be either. Janice Ellery says, my father said when he was in the Navy, they ate a lot of Spam. Matthew Turley, you demand Mr. Lehto. Thank you, Mr. Turley. See, I can do that too, Mr. MH08, a sign of the times. Hatbox, Spam isn't too bad, Fred. That's the funny thing. That it's actually an interesting flavored thing. If you ate it every single day, it was in every single dish, like spam, and spam, you might get sick of it. But I still think of it as going, I have fond memories of that. Maybe I should go out and break some out. Babylon Rose, my father was in Vietnam, 66, 67. He would never eat spam again after that. Yeah, you can also equate it with a bad experience or a bad time, you know. Carl's Corner says in New York City, that apartment sign went for $1,000 a month. I've seen some of those small apartments in New York City, and they are quite expensive. Shooting at Clouds says, why is there a moose on the Michigan flag? It's not a moose. I believe it's an elk. I believe there's an elk and a deer. But if there was a moose, it would make sense. There are moose in Michigan. Most of the moose are on Isle Royal. There's a couple moose running around loose in the Upper Peninsula on the mainland, not Isle Royal. It's been a while since I looked at the Michigan steel. It's the state seal that has it, but it would be appropriate. A wolverine is a better question because the Michigan Wolverines. That's their mascot, and there are no Wolverines native to Michigan right now, but there were when Michigan's territory went further west. And so I'm not sure when the last Wolverine was in what is now the state of Michigan, but there were Wolverines in the Michigan territory before we got statehood. So referring to us being the state of Michigan. Lewis Browning says, I'd send you a box of bacon, but it might go bad sitting in the P.O. box. Yeah, please don't send me food. I don't make it to the P.O. box every single day. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I don't. Mark Miller, Steve, you're a poet and don't know it. Danny D, I pay $850 a month for a 3-bedroom apartment in New York City. How big are those rooms? And are you living by yourself at that rate? Rent control? Reiner says, is living in a sign of the times? Gilbert says, Wolverine State is a motto. Well, the actual motto of the state of Michigan, as you know, is if you seek a pleasant peninsula, look about you. Wolverine State would be more of a nickname. But of course, it is the nickname of the mascot for the state University of Michigan sporting teams, for instance. So, shouting at clouds says, bacon. The authorized J as opposed to the unauthorized J. Hello, Mr. Lehto. Thank you for all your videos. They're great. I hope you have a great Memorial Day. I hope you do too. I hope everyone does. News Babe, happy Memorial Weekend, Steve. Thank you. I appreciate that. Babylon Rose says 2 closets and a sink. Takes care of almost everything, right? Brad M73. Steve, what does a juror do if they need to use the restroom? They let somebody know because they are the most important people there. And so trust me, if a juror needs to use the restroom, if they do so much as this, the judge will go, yes, use the restroom. We'll take a break. Now, if a witness or an attorney, juror, absolutely. David Martinez, how is the Viper doing? It's doing very well. I've not had a chance to get it out much this year yet, but I will. Northern Contrarian says, hello from Finland. Didn't know you did live shows. Cool. Yes, I tend to do them. On Sundays from 1 till 3 Eastern time, which is New York time for those of you who are outside of the country. So do the math. I'm guessing you guys are about an hour or 2 or 3 past England the other way. So like you're probably about 8 hours in the future, 7. Matthew shows from Steve Goes to P.O. Box anytime he instantly regrets agreeing to signing 500 books for people and then getting slammed with all the orders in 48 hours. That's pretty much it. Thank you, Matthew. Dan Busey, updates on Jay's turbine engine. Sort of. They're getting closer. I've seen it. It's getting much, much closer. They're really, really hoping. They're really, really hoping that they have it ready in time so they can show it off to Woodward Dream Cruise, which would be August. But if I get any updates, especially stuff I'm allowed to tell you, I will tell you. The Richard says, Aloha, Hawaii serves Spam for breakfast at McDonald's. Do they really? I know that there's sometimes regional things also for other countries, but I didn't know that you can go to McDonald's, get Spam in Hawaii. Now suddenly I want to go there. Moonchild Straver, I'm in Sweden and the stream starts at 7 p.m. local here. I don't remember if Finland is another hour ahead or not. Yeah, because I'm very. I mean, England it tends to be 5 hours, right? And then I go. Paris is 6. I'm guessing Sweden is 7. It would be Norway, Sweden, and Finland. So I'm not sure if each one of them is their own time zone quite yet, but I know that it works that way. Doom Pigeon, any raccoons raiding your garage? I've only seen one raccoon pop up on one of my cameras. I've not seen them in person. I see the footprints not near the house, but kind of out away from the house. I know they're present, but they're very cagey. I think they talk to the woodchucks. I think they do. Michael Wotraits. I dare you to pronounce my full name. Is it Wotraits or Wowtraits? The question is, if I knew what root it was, is it German or is it Dutch? But yeah, I'm sure I'm getting it wrong. I mispronounced my own name. Okay. Matthew Shosman says, I thought England was 6 hours, or was that having to do with daylight savings? That may have been daylight savings time. But, it's been a while since I was there. I could be wrong. Oh. Bill McMahon says, speaking of different foods you can get at McDonald's, you can get lobster poutine at McDonald's in Maine. And poutine, for those who don't know, is gravy and cheese curds on French fries. So you can get that. There's something wrong with that. I just don't know. Theodore Becker, why don't you affiliate yourself at the Institute for Justice? I'm not sure what you mean by that. I don't work for them. I can't go work for them because I have to move and stuff. But I like them and I support them, and I'm one of their biggest supporters. So I'm sure that I'm doing enough for them. So, but I hope that answers your question. SkyTech Bits, I love the raccoons. I love raccoons too. I've actually, and I've never really talked about this that much, but I've actually raised raccoons on 2 different occasions. Had a mother raccoon get killed in front of my house with 3 baby raccoons. And I spoke to an old college professor, said, yeah, you can raise them. They're actually, and I mean, they're all over YouTube. It's not hard to do, but it's not the smartest thing to do unless you have to. So don't just go out and find a baby raccoon and kidnap it and think that's going to make a great pet, because they outgrow the cute phase at the end of the first summer. And so I raised them and let them go way out in the middle of the woods someplace, and I think they're fine. The second time I did it was a lone raccoon, mother killed, and was in extremely bad shape when I found it. And I managed to get it back to health. I was doing things like pulling ticks out from between its fingers. It was bad. It was bad, but wound up becoming extremely healthy. And then I spoke to a woman who does animal rescue. I called her and she said, I'm overloaded. I cannot take the raccoon from you. I'm so sorry. I can't do it. So in the fall, I contacted her and said, look, I can't keep the raccoon. It's going to outgrow its welcome here. And she said, oh, she goes, well, she told me where she lived. And she goes, I live on a piece of property that backs up against a state park. And she goes, a lot of the raccoons I let go here, and they will eventually wander off on their own into the state park. But in the meantime, they can come back here and I'll feed them. And so I actually brought that raccoon to her house and we let it go there. And she sent me updates periodically and said, I saw him today. He came by today. And then he'll disappear for weeks and he'll come back later on and wander by, say hello, and then take off again. So he made it. And that's the sad thing. And I've seen so many dead raccoons by the roads because raccoons are built funny. They're built funny. And if they're walking along the ground, they're like jacked up like a hot rod from the 60s because their head and their shoulders are so close to the ground and their hips are so high off the ground. But it gives them a lot of leverage when they're working stuff with their hands. And also they're really good at climbing, and they can climb up and down head first like a squirrel can because they've got the extra, it's not an actual thumb, but it seems like a thumb. And very, very intelligent, smart animals. And I've encountered raccoons on a couple different occasions. As long as they don't get into your house, you're okay. Mrs. Teresa says, I have raccoons in my property up in Maine. My brother takes care of them for me. I have video on my channel showing the raccoons there. They're so cute how they use their little hands to eat. Oh, yeah. Jerry Brown says, it is illegal to raise wild animals in North Carolina without proper permits. And that's true in some places. You got to be very, very careful. So I see people get raccoons, start posting Instagram videos and stuff. And it's like, number one, like I said, when it grows up, you're no problem. And then number two, it might not be legal where you are. And so it's one thing to feed them. I didn't feel bad raising mine. I did some research. It wasn't illegal. But, you know, I couldn't start breeding them and selling them, I don't think. But, you know, so I don't really know. But Smoked Paprika says, greetings from Phoenix. The Richard said, I had raccoons finding a way into my house for months. Turns out the old floor was separated in a closet area. Fun for a bit until they get comfy. And they're very, very smart. And they'll also, I've seen video before, somebody's got like a noise in their drop ceiling. So they start filming it. And then the corner of the drop ceiling gets pulled up and a raccoon sticks his head out. And he puts it back down really quick. Like, and I saw a documentary, I think it was on the CBC, where they tagged raccoons with radio transmitters to figure out where they go during the day and during the night. And then they started filming, and they discovered that raccoons cover all kinds of ground, like huge, huge circuits at night. And then they'll often sleep in different places. And oh my, it was fascinating. Some of the places they can get to. But SkyTech Bit says they have very sharp teeth. Yes. And John Cipolla says they're not puppies. Yes. And Brian Bloomer says they're known as wash bears in Germany. Raccoons have this interesting habit. They use their hands for a lot of things. They say raccoons actually use their hands to feel something as well as to look at it. So if you watch a raccoon in the wild, it'll go to a river and start feeling around the bottom. And if it picks something up at the bottom, it'll often look like it's washing it. And that's actually one of the things that's often related to raccoons is their habit of washing things. And they'll also play with their food. And like they love cherries. They love grapes. And so, but I mean, when I was raising mine, I raised them on puppy chow. And that's what somebody told me that would be a good thing for them to be eating. And so, yeah, but once they get a little bigger, you do not want one biting you. You know, when they have no teeth, I remember here you go, picture this. I was bottle feeding raccoons, okay? And they have little nubby teeth that don't do anything at that age, you know, so nothing would happen. But I do know there's a book called Rascal. And if you haven't read it, I don't care if you're an adult or not, most of my audience says, read the book Rascal about the kid who raises a raccoon during, I think, World War I. And a fascinating children's book. And the book may have been made into a movie, but that story is very well known. And I know the book was translated into Japanese and became a cultural phenomenon in Japan. And somebody brought raccoons to Japan. And people, oh, these things are so cute. And again, they're cute until they get too big. And there are raccoons everywhere in Japan now. And so if you get bored, look up raccoons in Japan on YouTube. You'll see all these documentaries about it. Naj Abdullah says raccoons carry rabies. They can, but not in all parts of the country. So I wouldn't worry about encountering a raccoon with rabies in Michigan, but I know eastern Pennsylvania and New York State, maybe. Big Red says trash pandas. And that, of course, is what many people call them. That's quite possible. And I apologize. It's in the stack down here, I think. I've got like 50 or 60 now. Rob Noxious, why do you hide epic proportions media productions comments on your videos? I have no idea what you're talking about. Apologize. Fred Hoyt says they want their food wet, not clean. How do you know? Did you ask him? Gilbert says they also like to raise otters for house pets. Otters are cute. I know people who've got ferrets. I think they're all kind of similar. LA Detroit says no raccoons in the Philippines. Doesn't surprise me being an island and all that. There are raccoons, I believe, in the Keys, the Florida Keys, and I think also on some islands in the Caribbean, such that there actually are separate. I don't know if it's considered a separate subspecies, but there's different kind of raccoons that are on some of these islands. Morton Bob says, for what it's worth, Rascal is available to Audible members for free. Okay, there you go. It's a great book. When I think back on children's books I read as a child, Rascal and Paddle to the Sea. And Paddle to the Sea is a book that I've got right here next to my OED. And it's another book I rave about when I talk about children's books. Scott Summers, did I miss anything? I don't know. 48 minutes. There's about 3 minutes of silence on my part. But other than that, hey, it's still good. Oh, Tech Gorilla says we own chinchillas. Chinchillas are cool. I've seen them that people have as pets. Of course, they got that fascinating fur. They also live for a long time, don't they? Valerie Ann says we've had rabid raccoons in New Jersey. It doesn't surprise me. Over on the East Coast, like I said, Eastern Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey. I've heard of that over there, but it's not just an automatic thing. Spartacus says raccoons and iguanas fight at my place in the Caribbean. That would be something to see because I've seen iguanas that are about pound for pound the same size as a raccoon. And so Dr. Barry Cohn says raccoons are related to pandas. Yes, and of course they call them trash pandas. But yeah, it's funny because a lot of people think of pandas as bears and they go, oh, yeah, panda bear. No. Bears are separate. And I remember years ago, there was a beer commercial and they had billboards that went along with it. And it showed a bear drinking a beer and it had a thumb. And of course, if you know, bears don't have thumbs. So if it had been a raccoon, we wouldn't have argued as much. Would you raise a possum? I'm not I'm not so crazy about a possum, but on the other hand, if I saw a baby possum, I'd feel sorry for it and I might take it in and see what I can do for it. I don't know if I'd raise it though. I'm not really sure how well they do being handled by humans at that stage. Theodore Becker, do you play chess? Yes, I do. I'm not so good as to play any place where I'm rated or anything like that. But I do play chess. I can play pretty well. But I can also, I know chess well enough where I can watch a chess video by, like, say, Agadmator and understand it. Or Chess Vibes is a friend of mine. And I love watching people who know what they're doing analyze chess games. I remember reading chess analysis out of books when I was a little kid. And I wasn't, it's harder to do that, especially with the old notation. And I've also read several books on Bobby Fischer. And I understand the guy went nuts at the end of his life. But if you go back to his prime playing days in 1970, 71, 72, and you watch what he was doing at the peak of his skills, you go, that is mind-blowing. It is. What happened to him later, a whole different story. But that's it for chess. Najee says, I'm a truck driver. I see a lot of raccoons in truck stops. Well, yeah, of course. It's a ready source of food in the garbage. And of course, truck stops are happening all night long. So you pull into a truck stop at 3:00 in the morning, and it's not like the raccoons are going to go, well, we got to wait till these guys leave. So Mr. Incorrect says Steve seems really unlikely to manually shadow ban comments. Very common from YouTube itself, though. I hate to get into this because I always get accused of lying about this. But a lot of people don't realize that there are filters set by YouTube and stuff gets caught by those filters. And I've had people accuse me of doing that. And I say, why? What's going on? They tell me about a post they put up. Number one, I go and I find it immediately. Well, it's right there. Oh, well, my other post. And I'm not going to sit here and track down every single post you ever made to prove that they're all there. But number two, um, for all I know, it got caught by a filter. And a lot of people don't understand how the filters work. So, oh boy. Muscles Mouse, I had a raccoon live in my live in my attic. Alive. Had to complete the brickwork under the eaves to seal it and capture the raccoon. We released it 100 miles away. That gives you about a 50-50 he'll never make it back. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, and I've never had raccoons in my house that weren't there on my invitation, but I have had red squirrels. Red squirrels get in there, and I had to get a live trap and do that. So Theodore Becker says Fisher was a beast, but Morphe was best. It's so difficult to compare people from different generations. Morphe was a beast. So was Tell. But Fisher did some things, going through tournaments undefeated, things like that. But of course, Magnus Carlsen's rated higher than all of them. But you also got to understand that Magnus Carlsen can study the games of Fisher and Tell and Morphe, So it's kind of like, could Babe Ruth hit home runs off today's pitching? No, he couldn't. But for the time, look what he did, so. Richard Ballou, morning, Mr. Lehto. Morning, Mr. Ballou. Scott Summers, if they can get all Bobby's strategies for chess, wonder if it's teachable. Oh, they've already got chess programs that can beat anybody. And somebody asked earlier about Go. I do not play Go. I've never played Go. I barely understand it, but they've also got a bot program that plays Go and can beat any human as well. And in fact, there's a famous documentary about that particular story where they programmed this machine to play Go, and they brought in the world champion, and it beat him so badly, I think he retired. They may have come back, but I know at one point in time he had actually retired. So. Earthbound Misfits, a deep blue. Yeah, there's several different programs now, but I mean, you can buy, Stockfish or whatever, and it's interesting because the machines play differently, but as you think about it, there's only so many. I know there's an infinite number of positions on a board, but at any given time, there is a finite number of moves. And so it's a question of just how much, processing power you have and how much memory you've got and so on. G Voked, hello, Steve. Glad you are on again. Kevin Wang says, I don't like coleslaw, but I love Lehto slaw. I was going to do a video, but I thought it was just a little bit too meta. I was going to do a video where I literally just pretended I was a cooking show and explained how to make Lehto slaw. But it sounds funnier than it probably would have been. Jerry Brown says raccoons don't have thumbs. I know. I said they don't have thumbs, but they've got something that looks a lot like one. But if you ask a biologist, they go, it's not a true thumb, but it's more like one than what a bear's got. So. Reiner Mess Steve's side commenters need to pick up our game. Well, I told myself that there's 2 or 3 questions I get asked every single live stream. And I'm going to stop addressing them because I just 10 minutes of every video is just me answering these same questions over and over again. And I don't know if people legitimately don't know the answers to these questions or if they've never seen like live stream before. I don't know. So I'm trying to get into the more substantive things here. Skytech Bits says this time of year, mama raccoons are searching for more food even during the day, just so people know. And also, it's a rule of thumb, at least in Michigan, around Mother's Day is when they say you start seeing baby raccoons, because that's around the time when the mothers feel safe where they can leave the nest and bring the babies with them. And so you'll start seeing baby raccoons popping up around Mother's Day, which is end of Memorial or end of May, beginning of June. Now, of course, the further north you get, that might come a little later. Further south might come sooner. But I know that that's the rule of thumb. Brian Bloomer, is a hard copy of the OED worth it since Google is so quick? Yes, I like having the hard copy. You can look up most of the stuff online, but it's still fun to me paging through the book and just seeing all the other stuff in there. I almost always get distracted when I open up the OED because I start looking at other words. I'm like, oh, I forgot about that one. Oh, BW, it's getting hot in here. I suppose it depends on where you are. It's 78 degrees outside where I am right now in southeastern Michigan. We've got 603 people in the room, by the way. POV with RC says hard copies never change. That's true. That's true. And I always forget to turn off that alarm. I get an alarm that goes off at 2 o'clock to remind me in case I need to put up a 2 o'clock video, which I'm not doing today, but sometimes I do. Daniel Kester says, is the Canadian robot lady in today? I don't think she is, and I forgot to send her a note. I often do. So Horsepower System says 1984, a lawyer represented me for $125, never billed me a penny after that first payment. It was against the Veterans Association and we won. Wow. Wow. Well, I can tell you that I actually had a situation where, let me see if I can tell this story correctly, where somebody had a problem with the Secretary of State's office in Michigan. The Secretary of State's office in Michigan is where you get your driver's license, your license plates, all that stuff. And this woman called me and described the problem she was having with the Secretary of State's office. That was so weird. It was so weird. I said, normally I don't even handle stuff like this, but you probably can't find anybody who handles it on a regular basis. So I will. And I handled the case for her and we got a resolution. But the weird part was I was so surprised that that what she had told me was correct, that is how it was. I actually said, there's no charge. I enjoyed the case. We got a good result and it was such a strange case. I'll take that as payment. It was weird. It was a while ago. Not a banned account says, how are no-knock raids on non-violent crimes legal? That's an interesting question. And again, I'm not here to defend the legal system. I'm just here to explain it to you. And that's something you hear about where occasionally something goes so horribly off the rails, where they show up at the wrong address, or they show up with a no-knock raid on somebody who's not violent, and they throw flash bangs in the house, and people get injured, and we're here to arrest somebody because they had, unpaid tickets or something. I don't know. I'm making something up here. And it ought to be proportional. It ought to be. It ought to be. But you also do hear about the other side where somebody, they go to execute an arrest warrant, and next thing you know, there's somebody holed up inside a house, screaming about how you're not going to take me alive, so. Doug Smith, could you get a DUI on a motorized wheelchair? Probably. Depends what state you're in. But some states say specifically, if you're operating anything that is self-powered and self-propelled, and you're drunk, and you're doing it either on the roadway or in a place that's open to traffic, then the question becomes, what about on the sidewalk? I don't know. Depends on the state you're in. It's going to vary. But I seem to recall doing one where a guy got a DUI on one of those little electric toy trucks that kids ride on. So, shooting at cloud says, please come to Texas and hunt wild hogs. We need hunters. Wild hogs are the craziest thing. We don't have them in Michigan yet, as far as I know. But wild hogs reproduce at a rate that makes rabbits look sterile. And they can get to be large. They can get to be huge. And then they also do all kinds of damage. And it's scary. It's scary, the stuff that they can do. And so I know they're trying to get it under control. So, um, Zen AX, as I forgot where it was, but I remember on a news story, a guy got a DUI while on his horse, and someone else mentioned horses also, Matthew. And that's an interesting argument because obviously a horse is not motorized, but it is self-propelled. But I think they usually say motorized. And so the question is, and it would depend on the definition in your state. And so this is something that people don't know that much about, but you want to find out what drunk driving is in your state. In Michigan, you type in Michigan compiled laws, drunk driving defined, and you can find it. It's in 257 someplace, the motor vehicle code. And there'll be a definitional section as to what defines drunk driving. And much of it will be defined there, and some of it will say, or a motor vehicle as defined elsewhere. And you go look at that. You may have to poke around a little bit to find it, but you eventually will find it. And so you'll find that when it comes to certain types of crimes involving automobiles, they'll often broaden it for drunk driving, but narrow it for other things. So Shouting at Clouds says, yeah, horse is self-driving. And that's one of the arguments that people make is that, believe it or not, there are guys out there who've got a horse. They ride the horse. And if they were drunk or incapacitated otherwise, they could put their head down, fall asleep, and the horse will get them home, usually. But the question is, so should people be doing that? BW says lawnmower DUI. I remember hearing a couple of those. Gilbert says you'd think since you have to guide the horse, but I've heard people claim. I've heard people claim that no, I knew a guy with a horse that the horse would get him home one way or the other. The horse knows where it lives. The horse knows the way. Is that song right? Not a band account says what act of Congress created qualified immunity, and of course that is the joke. Because qualified immunity is generally speaking an invention of the courts, and they admit that. They just said, well, we kind of did this. So Keith Donaldson, but officer, my horse doesn't drink. Kenneth Wiggins says the hogs will attack a human. Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that if you stood your ground and were upright, you'd be okay. But I've seen some big ones, and then of course, if they got you on the ground, all bets are off. They'd stomp you. Yeah, go the south way. What if the horse is drunk? Oh boy, hang on. I forgot last time that I needed to drink water from time to time. Nate Hess says his brother worked in Houston, and the guys took him out to shoot wild hogs. I suspect that that's probably considered a public service down there. Walter Edwards, if you had the chance, would you purchase a turbine car? And if you did, would you drive it? That's a tough question. I think it's one of the coolest cars ever made, but if I owned one, I'd have a hard time driving it without freaking out. Because they cost millions of dollars, and to keep them running is also difficult, as we're learning right now. But I've mentioned before that one of the reasons I got that Cobra and I bought a brand new Cobra, I don't feel bad driving it. And so I can drive it, put miles on it, and that's fine. But if I had a car that I thought belonged in a museum, I've been rear-ended before by somebody who was looking at their phone. And if they rear-ended me in a turbine car, I would lose it. If they rear-ended my Viper, I'd probably lose it too. But it would be a more graduated loss. Oh, Lowell Rigsium, why buy a car not to drive it? I couldn't imagine. And that's the thing, So Jerry, see a horse walks in a bar and the bartender asks, why the long face? Brian Butterworth, horses will bring you home. We had 15 quarter horses. When I was in high school, they still had places you could rent horses and go horseback riding in Oakland County, Michigan. I'm not sure if you can anymore, at least not the way you could. There's a place out on 15 Mile Road. Gilbert might be able to fill me in on some of this, near Orchard Lake Road, called Roy's Ranch. You go there and for, I don't know, $5 or something, rent a horse for an hour. And if you wanted to, you could go with a group and they'd take you around this big loop where you go walking, walking, walking. But if you said I'm okay, they'd say, okay, fine. You can just get on the horse and your way around, just be back in an hour. And I had a friend I would go with occasionally who sometimes would fall off the horse. And the funny thing is, occasionally she'd fall off the horse and the horse would just take off and go back to the horse knew where it was going. And I swear there were times where the horse was trying to scrape people off. Like, you know something? I know you're going to take me on this big, long walk all the way around the property. I don't feel like doing that again. Hey, let's go look at this tree. And, so Gilbert, nasty little Shetland ponies. They had those too at Roy's Ranch. Did you go to Roy's Ranch ever? The reason I ask is that I was there one time and the woman was about to put the saddle on the horse. She looks at me. She goes, "You ever ride bareback?" And I go, "I never have." And she goes, "It's not hard to do." I said, "Okay." So I did it. And so every time I go there, she go, "You don't get a saddle. Just ride bareback." And you just hang on with your legs. That's all. But obviously, if a horse is trying to get rid of you and you didn't have a saddle, it'd be a little harder. So, not a banned account. Can police subpoena mileage, tax, telemetry data? Well, they can subpoena anything they want if they can show, probable cause as to why they should do that. I'm just not sure who they'd be getting the subpoena for or what they'd be doing with it. But I've never heard of them doing that, but it wouldn't surprise me. If it exists, then yes, they will subpoena it. Gilbert says, yes, birthday parties in my youth. The area is all gone now. I remember driving by it in later years. It obviously been sold. And I think there's like some subdivisions and then some like office complexes back there. But Roy's Ranch, I remember going there. I'm talking about like should I tell you? 1979, 1978. So it's been a while. Writer Dude 2 says horses will try to scrape people off if they find them annoying. I would assume that horses would just find all people annoying because they want to climb on your back and make you walk around places. Chat GPT says Steve uses me to draft his legal documents. Oh my gosh. We're starting to hear stories now about these attorneys who still haven't learned that you can't use Chat GPT, especially when it comes to citing cases that don't exist. Gilbert says, my grandpa owned a farm where Henry Ford Hospital is now on Commerce Road. Yeah, that's amazing how people who bought farms back in the day out in the middle of nowhere, suddenly the land became extremely valuable as the city grew out that way. So, not a banned account. Can police compel you to unlock your cell phone? Well, I did a video on this very recently because, as you might know, there was a case recently where the police had the phone. They asked the guy to unlock it, and he said no. So they grabbed his thumb and they jammed it on there and did it. And he fought that on Fourth and Fifth Amendment grounds. And the court said, well, it's no different than fingerprinting you. Like if they can fingerprint you against your will, then why can't they fingerprint your phone against your will? And I disagree with that ruling. I disagree wholeheartedly with that ruling. But that's what the court said. So there you go. Blue Freaker, have you seen the insanity that's Google's AI overviews? Yes, I have. Yes. So here's what's going on. So Google has a search engine, I understand. And if you type in a question, it would have this thing pop up at the top with some sources that it's going to refer to and then give you some answers. And that sources are going to refer you to apparently ties in with AI somehow. And so people were asking questions such as, how many rocks per day should I eat? And the AI would apparently go check the Onion and go, geologists recommend you eat 1 rock per day, not recognizing that the Onion was a parody. And that's one of the biggest problems. And so they discovered a whole bunch of those kinds of questions that you could ask it. And so I typed in, when did Christ return to the NBA? But apparently there's some guy whose last name is Christ, and it screwed up my search. But there was a really good Onion headline that came up back in the early 90s. Christ returns to the NBA. And they had artwork for it where Jesus is going up for a dunk. I understand it's sacrilegious, but it was funny. Okay. Hat boxes have been bucked off and also kicked by horses. Not fun. So that was always my fear. Falling from that height wouldn't be fun. Landing on your head would be less fun. Back then, they didn't make us wear helmets. But boy, getting stepped on or kicked by a horse, that could cause some very, very serious harm. MHO8, The Onion's a parody? I think not. Strangely, there's times where you're looking at it going, I wonder if this is like, maybe this isn't. Uh, Hugo's Travels. Hello from Torrance, California. Johnny Quest. We shared the ferry to Mackinac Island with someone's saddle horse standing on cardboard. Well, I'm sure you know Mackinac Island is overrun by horses. There's horses all over out there, and there's a big number of horses on the island who are seasonal. And they actually spend most of their winters on a ranch up north of St. Ignace a ways. I forgot exactly the town name. It'll come to me in a second. But Pickford, I think. But there are horses everywhere out there. But horses do occasionally travel back and forth, and that does not surprise me at all. One year, late in the year, I was coming back from Mackinac Island on the ferry, and I was talking to some guys, and I realized they were locals who'd spent time on the island. And I said, "Oh, do you guys live there?" I said, "No, we work there in the summer." I go, "What do you do?" And the one guy goes, "I'm a farrier." I go, "Farrier? You're you work with horses and horseshoes?" He goes, "Yes." Most people don't know what that means. And I said, "Oh, okay." And he started telling me about it. And he was one of the guys who spent his days doing horse maintenance. He was a farrier. And he was done for the season. He was heading home, and so were the horses a couple days later. Not a band account says Kansas City's rezone mechanics shops out of business. Well, they try. And I've done stories. There was one story from the Institute for Justice where they told a guy who wanted to open up a shop. They said, well, you need to have like 25 parking spaces. You need to have this. You need to have that. They started describing things that he could never accomplish. And so they were, in essence, regulating him right out of business. And so the Institute for Justice took his case. I'm not sure that's done litigating yet, but that kind of stuff does happen. And the sad part is that a lot of times, don't get me wrong, a lot of times the people in charge will look at something and have a knee-jerk reaction and go, oh, it's going to be a mechanic shop, so they have junked cars out front. Well, there's already rules on blight and eyesores. And you know, I worked at a gas station. When we had a car that came in that was wrecked, we put it out back so you couldn't see it from the road. You know, we would do that as quickly as we could. So I feel sorry for somebody who wants to start a business like that, and they think they can until they get everything in place, and then they go, oh, by the way, it turns out that you got to do this, you got to do that, and they have a whole bunch of new regulations that you hadn't thought of yet. So Kinkajou 1015. Oh, look, it's a Steve Lehto. Hey there. Oh, look, it's Kinkajou. Oh boy. Steve, hello from just south of Dayton, Ohio. So close to I-75, I can hear the traffic. You get used to it, right? Hugo's Travels. When you went to law school in Los Angeles, did you go to the Southwestern located at the old Robinson's building? I think you mean the Bullocks on Wilshire. It's a nice old building. No, I went to law school before they got that building, but they've since taken it over. I've been back since then, and they took over the Bullocks building on Wilshire with like a 99-year lease. And the cool thing is they got the parking deck behind it. When I went there, I had to rent a parking space 6 blocks away and walk, and it was a gauntlet. And so it would have been so nice to have on-site parking, but that came later. Neuropilot, wasn't the Killdozer case about zoning someone out of business? I think it was, but it's been a long time. Givoked Hola from Albuquerque. Chat GPT says Steve hates it when you read my comments. I'm not sure what that means. David Martinez, what do you think of the HOA? Which one? I actually did a video about HOAs. It's going up tomorrow. So I talk about them from time to time. One of my favorite topics. And the crazy part is that people are always asking me, is there some way to get out of an HOA. And you could theoretically dissolve one, but it's like trying to dissolve a corporation. And I think it's even harder because it's built into the deeds on these properties. So it's hard. My best solution is don't. Alex K, what do you think of Forgotten Weapons? That's a channel. I've only seen a few videos, but I believe the person really knows what they're talking about. I think it was him, do a video about the weapons in Saving Private Ryan. And I've seen a lot of documentaries about Saving Private Ryan and videos and so on. And so one of the cool things, hey Mark Heil, how you doing? Happy Sunday. Is that Saving Private Ryan was done very well, but nothing's perfect. And so one of the interesting things about Saving Private Ryan is you'll recall that there's the guy named Jackson who's firing a rifle like this, but he reaches over to cock the bolt with this hand and does it that way. And several people said, why doesn't he just get a left-handed rifle? And it's because that particular one wasn't made left-handed. And this guy's explaining the whole thing about how that was actually correct, but it turns out the scope he was using was wrong. So it's something that like 3 people on Earth spotted, and he's one of them. So there's some other things, but the movie is so overwhelmingly good that you can overlook the tiny little things that only experts spot. I love Scotch. HOA wanted me president. I told them I would dissolve it. I've mentioned before, I lived in a condominium. I was a member of the board of the condo association for a year or two, and I hated it. And it was strange because you're dealing with people who a lot of times would go, I didn't know I was a part of an association. And like, well, you bought a condo, you knew you were paying money to somebody, right? Yeah, but I thought that was like just for like maintenance or something. Well, it is, but there's rules you got to follow. Really? Yeah. Didn't you get a copy of this rule booklet at closing? Well, I got all kinds of stuff at closing. I didn't read it. Okay. Lowell Rixium. Can't you just vote them out of existence? I think you could, but it would take like a super majority or something. And I'm not even sure. It's gonna vary wildly from state to state. Go the Southway says, I asked Copilot who Steve was. It said Steve Lehto is a multifaceted legal professional. Killer GB 420. Have you ever traveled to the Pacific Northwest, Oregon to be precise? And what do you think? No, I have not. I'd love to. I've always wanted to. When I was in California in law school, I wanted to run up there and just check it out. I've been all over California, but never Oregon or Washington or Vancouver. I've never been up that way, and I'd like to. I really would, but I did not make it there yet. I will one of these days. Oh boy! So I'm playing a little game here. I'll explain the game at the end. What of? Yay! Steve is live again. The Prodigal Stranger says, my mother's condo came with 2 books of rules about as thick as all the volumes of Steve's OED. Wouldn't surprise me. But the sad part is that you'd think that the average person would look at it and go, if it's that thick, I either really ought to read it or run, because if it's that thick, think of all the bad things that could be there. But people just sign a bunch of stuff and they're in the mood because they just signed 1,000 pages of documents. So JB Welch says, I live in Seattle. It sucks. Midwest is better. MHO meanwhile says the Pacific Northwest is awesome. Beata Graf of Dalhagen says, I've not traveled to Oregon in 20 years. Najee, have you ever checked out Arizona, Phoenix, or Tucson? I've traveled through them. I've never spent any time there. I've traveled through them. I know that people rave about Arizona, but I've not spent much time there. Sharon O'Brien, have you ever come here to Georgia? A bunch of times. I've been through Georgia many times. Haven't spent a lot of time there, but it's nice. It's nice. Vince Roberts, hi Steve from Unicoi, Tennessee. Huh. I do know that there was apparently a big get together at Richard Petty's place yesterday in North Carolina near Level Cross. And I feel bad. If I'd known it was happening, I would have tried to get there. But a friend of mine was there, brought his car, and he's got pictures of Richard Petty just walking around talking to people. MX Sport, have you ever had the police called on you metal detecting? Believe it or not, yes. And I once had a police officer, and I'm embarrassed to admit this. I once had a police officer walk up to me and she goes, "You need to stop doing this." And I go, "Why?" And she goes, "You just need to stop." And I was in one of those moods where I'm like, you know something, I should mess with her some more, but I'm not going to. So I said, fine. And I walked over, threw it in my vehicle, and I left. I came back the next day and just picked up where I left off. Because if it's not explicitly forbidden and you're on public property with a metal detector, you can metal detect. Now, obviously, if you dig in the ground and damage the ground, they can say, hey, you damaged the ground. And I've actually had a police officer walk over while I was detecting. And I looked at him, can I help you? And he goes, no, I'm just watching. I said, okay. I dug a couple of holes. I go, are you cool? And he goes, yeah, we're good. And he walked away. And he came over to see if I was damaging anything. And I wasn't. And so he left me alone. Mind Bend. You ever been to Florida? A whole bunch of times. You have a license plate from Florida. I sent it. Which one? I've got several from Florida. So Randall Linson, I met Petty as a kid. He's such a nice guy. He's been around a long. I've interviewed him before. Very, very nice guy. I like when you say people say Steve from Nanaimo. That's right, right? Nanaimo. Sean John, thank you, my friend. Checking in with $2 Canadian, which is like what, $1.60 US or something. But I appreciate that. I really do. I'm not making fun. I'm not making fun of your currency. I love your money. It's cool looking stuff. I like your toonies also. I think those are neat. Can the evolution of the meaning or definition of a word change a statute legal definition after it's written? That's an interesting question. I'm not sure if I've ever seen that happen. I've seen statutes get rewritten where they update words, and I cannot think of an example. But I can imagine it. But you'll know a lot of times they'll often have a catch-all. So they'll say, you know, any automobile, motorcycle, motorized bicycle, motorized trike, motorized this, motorized that, you know, and any other self-propelled wheeled vehicle. And that catch-all is going to get it. But I don't know. I have to think about it. That's an interesting question. Because so many statutes get rewritten occasionally, like the important ones seem to, that I think it'd be hard-pressed to have that happen without them getting it ahead of time. So Ben Chung was a Wolverine, but hadn't heard they aren't native to the state boundaries anymore. Thanks for the info. Taz1669 says, thanks for all the videos. Best wishes from Aberdeen, Scotland. Never been to Scotland or Ireland, and I'd like to go sometime. Unfortunately, my list of places I can go and the time I've got probably don't quite correlate perfectly. So, Chris, Steve is still alive. I had to run out to the hardware store to fix a faucet and thought I'd missed the end. Yeah, I was quiet for about 5 minutes waiting for you to come back. Randall Lynn, Petty engine just blew that day at the Daytona 500, and they used my CP to get me in to see him. Not quite sure what's going on there, but okay. Righteous by Faith is giving us a bunch of cool signs there. Thank you very much. Sterling Wheel says, can I sue the state of California because I didn't get cancer? Prop 65. No, that proves that Prop 65 is working. They put warnings on everything. They have absolutely proven that if you put warnings on everything, to where the warnings are ad nauseum, as they say, that eventually people just ignore them. And so it gets to the point where, I mean, I'm in a store picking up a package and it goes, warning for the people of California. And I'm like, I'm not in California. Oh, okay. And I read it and it's like, yeah, this may cause whatever and whatever. Prop 65. And I'm like, oh, okay. Your Prop 65 screwed up packaging across the nation. Sixter01, I'm a fellow metal detectorist from West Point, Georgia. I feed a possum named Rufus for a while. I enjoy your channel. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Have not gotten the detector out this year. I got it out last year a couple times. Last time I went detecting, I found two large scents, no, one large scent, five Indian heads, and a buffalo nickel. Very, very hot spot where I was. And then I also found an Indian head penny at a separate location with a friend of mine. Tiffany Hayward is getting a hug from the FBI with a laughing emoji and a appears to be Santa Claus. Matt Monroe. I went to school with a kid named Matt Monroe. Ever owned any early BMWs? No. I famously have never owned a foreign car. And you know, I get grief about that. And people are like, Steve, what? No, you can own anything you want. I just never have. I'm not preachy about it, but I've never owned a BMW. So can't speak about that. Lowell Rigsium says everything seems to cause cancer: drinking coffee and not drinking coffee. Steve, did you see the Jeopardy where nobody knew the original lead singer of Van Halen? One person guessed Sam Kinison, another guessed Eddie Vedder, and another guessed Eddie Van Halen. Oh my gosh. Well, I've been backstage to a Van Halen concert when David Lee Roth was the lead singer. Pretty sure he was the correct answer or the correct question. But that just shows you that yeah. Now Sam Kinison did have a hit record with his version of Wild Thing. Don't forget that. Eddie Vedder. Somebody's obviously confusing Eddie and Eddie, but oh my god, oh, unbelievable. So Kevin Johnson, do you subscribe to Battleship New Jersey? You mean a YouTube channel? No. I'm not familiar with that. Steve, what's your favorite road trip outside of Michigan? It's hard to say. I do a lot of road trips in Michigan. I mean, I've driven to California a few times. I've driven to Florida a few times. I've driven all over the place a few times. And unfortunately, usually when I'm going someplace and I'm taking the road, I'm usually just getting there as fast as I can. So I can tell you, I went to Pennsylvania, was it last year, to speak at a museum about Tucker and had a great time. And when I was out there in Pennsylvania, near Hershey, driving around the country roads out there was so cool. I had a blast out there. In fact, I went to dinner at a restaurant that was an old mill. Forgot the name. It might have been called the Old Mill. Literally, just came around a curve. There's an old mill turned into a restaurant. I'm like, oh, what a great place to have dinner. Had the most fantastic meal. Jumped back in the car and was driving around some more. So, you know, you can enjoy a lot of different places. Cody Berg, what's up, brother? What's up, Cody, my friend? Janice Ellery, being alive causes cancer. What also does lead to death? Nate has Japanese cars all the way. See, it's kind of hard to imagine, but I grew up in Detroit in the 60s and 70s. And there was a time where you did not drive a Japanese car anywhere in that neighborhood where I lived because it would have been bad. It would have been bad. And I can take you right now. I can show you parking lots that still have signs, no foreign cars. Today. I can show you one today. So Jerry Brown says, is it still an American car if most of the parts came from China or Mexico? Well, that's always the fight. And so, you know, I had a guy go, Steve, your Viper is German. Your Viper is German. Like, how do you figure? He goes, because Daimler Chrysler. I go, yeah, but it was designed by Americans in Detroit and hand built in Detroit. And Chrysler is an American company. No, once they got bought by Daimler, it's German. You're driving a foreign car. And, you know, you can't argue with some people. So I still go off the badge. So in my mind, Ford, GM, and Chrysler are American. BMW, Hyundai, Kia, and those are foreign. I had someone go, Steve, what about a Ferrari? Technically, it's foreign. Well, wouldn't you like to own a Ferrari? Yeah, who's got that kind of money, you know? Greg K, didn't your mom buy a foreign car? Yes, she did. Yes, she did. And by the way, That was a big thing in our family. That was a big thing in our family. And she said, "But you guys understand this, right?" And we're like, "Yes, we do. Yes, we do." So I stood by her in that decision. I'm not saying all 6 boys stood by her on that decision, but I think she got a majority of us on that. Yeah, Dan Boyd says Dimer was not in the picture when the Viper was designed. Gordon 861 says the Viper was German; it would go around corners. It'd probably have airbags too. No, I'm just kidding. Mine has airbags. Eric S says your Indian head is now worth 350. Is that about the going rate for a type coin Indian head? Unfortunately, mine's got a lot of what they call ground action or the corrosion. For some odd reason, Indian head pennies in particular, although a lot of Lincoln wheat pennies are the same composition. If they're in moist soil, they get this corrosion. It looks almost like what you'd see on a coral reef or something. Silver coins come out of the ground much cleaner. But ZSI GMIR Zigmir. I still love the 70s muscle cars. They were the best. I love watching the Mecum auto auctions and just to see the crazy stuff that crosses the block. And you'll see some guy who, got a GTO Judge. It's got 70 miles on it. And it's like a time machine. It's like it's a time capsule. It's untouched, and it's cool to see, but then you feel sorry. Some guy bought it and never drove it. Like, that's sad. Dan Daly says the engine for Viper was co-engineered by Ferrari. I think you're thinking of Lamborghini. Lamborghini at the time had a relationship with both Chrysler and Daimler, and the 10 cylinder. Yeah. Skytech Bits points out the parts inside of all cars are from other countries. Nothing is 100% made in America in any car, but we welcome other countries too. Yeah. So David Twigg says it's environmental damage. Yes, that's what it's often called. The belt buckle I found had very little of it, but just enough to show how old it was. Daniel Kester, have you seen the Pink Panther car? You mean like a show car? Yes, I've seen that. There's a lot of those weird show cars from back in the day. Oh my, unbelievable. William Page, life is terminal. Meredith Wards has had horses most of my life. Never had a problem with quarter horse geldings. They are typically more mellow. And also, age of horse matters. 12-year-old is a middle-aged horse. Never ride an Appaloosa. I bet there's a story there. Oh, boy. Hey, from San Antonio, Georgiana Thornton. Thank you for checking in, my friend. Lowell Rigsium says, hey, the statistics say that a percentage of us will die. Yeah, 642 people in the room, and I suspect about 300 years from now, most of us won't be here. Northern Contrarian says, climbing up a tree ass first is a Finnish proverb. I've never heard it. I bet in Finnish it's about this long of a sentence, too. I think about that every time I hear a story about cops not getting warrants when they could, and the case is dismissed. That is one of those things that I legitimately find baffling. I'm genuinely curious. Okay? I'm genuinely curious when the police go, okay, we want that thing over there for evidence. We could get a warrant, but why bother? Okay, you're living dangerously. You understand if you could get the warrant but didn't need it, you're covered. But if you needed the warrant and didn't get it, you're not covered. Err on the side of getting the warrant. Why not? And all I can think is it must be too much work. That must just, too much work. That's all I can think. It's all I can think. I don't know what else to say. So, SM Tiffin, second generation Ford worker. My parents and I both retired from there. They did not take the bailout. That's the craziest thing about, remember that 2 of the 3 big companies, Ford didn't, but GM and Chrysler both did take federal bailouts to get through the bankruptcy. And so it's like General Motors, it has the same name and the same like intellectual property, but technically speaking, it's not the same company from the 1970s or 80s. It's just such a weird thing to think about. Jerry Brown says, I'll be a head in a jar in 1,000 years. But will you be self-aware? Because if you're a head in a jar and you're self-aware, that would drive you crazy, wouldn't it? Or would you be like, oh, eh. Humongous Warrior, have you mentioned what type of metal detector you use? I use a White's V3i. Prior to that, I had a White's DFX, but White's has gone out of business. My understanding is they sold most of their assets to Fisher. And so I don't think you can buy a brand new White's anymore unless it's new old stock. But they are great detectors. I always love their stuff. But other companies make good detectors also. So I wouldn't say you have to use a White's, but I just know that when I hung out with people who use White's, we could help each other. And they are kind of complicated. It's basically a computer on a stick. And you got to really learn to use this thing and tune it in. It's a very, very fine machine with what it does. So neuropilots in 300 years will all be an AI brain with a robot body. And the question is, will they let us live our lives, or will we be somehow enslaved like the Matrix? Unless, of course, we're actually in the Matrix right now. Shooting at Clouds Mustang 5.0 is my favorite breed. I really, it's funny because I was never a big Ford guy growing up, although my brother worked at Ford and I've owned a bunch of Ford Explorers. I'm talking about the hot rods. I was more of a Chrysler Mopar guy. And but I really do like the Shelby Mustangs. I love the like a 69 convertible, I think it's 69 convertible Shelby is a beautiful car, but they're expensive. Now, these cars I drooled over as a teenager are now like hundreds of thousands of dollars at auctions. So Janice Ellery says, I had a 66 Mustang Fastback. I love the car, but upkeep on classics is expensive. It is, except that you can find like a Mustang parts and knowing people who know how to work on it, real easy, real easy. There's some other oddball stuff. I've talked to people lately who've owned some really strange cars. And, it's like trying to find parts for something built in 1916 is kind of hard. So Michael Watritz refers, of course, to Eleanor, which is the car from Gone in 60 Seconds. So Feral Kitty, my mechanic cousin named his daughter Shelby. BW Shelby is great. I always wonder how many people put things like that together. Like does his wife know that's where the daughter's name came from? And the wife is okay with that? Gilbert says I could work on a pre-1975 car. Yeah, but how about a pre-war car, pre-World War I, like 1914, 1913, So Righteous by Faith says, I remember watching a movie called Run, Appaloosa Run on a Disney Channel back when I was a kid and fell in love with a brief. From that time on, I thought if I ever buy a horse, it's going to be an Appaloosa. But somebody just above said, don't do that. You don't want the Appaloosa. A bit of truth, my first car was so great. A 1968 Peugeot 404, the most amazing suspension. And I'd kill for one today. I had a friend, though, who had a Peugeot in the 90s and had a hard time finding people to work on it. Because they're like, yeah, you have to pay us a lot of money. And you shop around and try to find somebody who could work on it. So Meredith Wart's Appaloosa horses are very temperamental by breed. Add in a young, green, broke mare, and you have issues. I can imagine. Eric S. My C7 is peak Corvette. I like the C8s, though. I do like the C8s. There's a couple years of Corvettes, the early 80s, that didn't do a whole lot for me, but I like the C8s. I do. Rozdar 76 is, were you ever married? Yes. I don't talk about questions like that often because to me, they're not that interesting. And also, I'm an attorney. Wouldn't you rather talk about that? But I have mentioned before. So for instance, there's a video called I Went to Court Looking Like This. And the thumbnail is a picture of me after I just got back from the emergency room with half my face scraped off and my arm in a cast. And when I told the story of that, I pointed out that I was wearing a ring on this finger. And when I crashed, a friend of mine came over and helped me up. And he looked at my hand. He goes, dude, quick, get your ring off. And I pulled my ring off just as my hand swelled up to where that finger got about that big around. I would have lost my finger. And then in the story, I later said, went back to my car, called the person affiliated with that piece of jewelry, and went to the hospital. And so I think most people picked up on the fact that at least when I told that story, I was married. Aaron Freeman, how is marriage not a legal issue? It happens so often. It wasn't, it's not something that everybody's like, ooh, you're married? Tell us more. Oh, Jeff, Mr. Fix It, you should show your coins and fines. Well, I did do the video about the belt buckle. I actually have all my coins and fines in a holder, so they're on display. But only people who are really into coins care. I've shown them people who aren't into coins. They're like, oh, those are just dirty old coins. And I'm like, yeah, but do you understand this is an 1806 large penny that I found 8 inches down in a little town that was founded in like 1835? Yeah, but look, it's dirty. It's dirty. So it's hard to get other people to appreciate that. Michael Thacker, what do you think of no fault divorce? I tend to favor it because I do think that if people don't want to be married, courts shouldn't force them to stay married. I will tell you that one of the big disappointments in my mind of the court system, and it's not their fault, is that people get married in churches quite often and divorced in court. I know some people get married in court. Most people don't get married in court. Okay. So, and if they do, it's not the same ceremony that they're going to have when they get divorced. And so courts aren't greatly suited for divorce. And so, unfortunately, what starts out as this, let's all be happy and happily ever after until death do us part. And then it goes the exact opposite where we're fighting and we want to kill each other. And that's in a court. The court gets the ugly part of it. And so I don't do divorces. I have literally signed my name to, I think, 2 or 3 divorce complaints where I help friends of mine or something like that. And I couldn't do that for a living. And I know people who do. And I talk to them and they're like, oh no, it takes a special like mindset. It's a thought process, a frame of mind thing. And you are either suited for it or you're not. And you'd be as frustrated as your clients would be if you got into that and weren't ready for it. So Mike D says all your stories are interesting. You are a gifted storyteller. Yeah, because you haven't heard all the boring ones. Mike Lackner, how many hours of metal detection would it take to make a good 20-minute YouTube video? It depends. There are guys out there who do it. And the key is to find a good place. So I can tell you before that I once found a location where I found 3 large pennies, or large cents, barber dime, a handful of wheat pennies in the space of like 40 feet by 40 feet. It took me grand total of 2 hours to check that because I went over it 2 or 3 times. So if you'd filmed all of that and spliced it together, it would look like somebody's pulling monster fish out of a river with almost no effort. But I've also gone places where I've gone detecting for hours and found nothing of significance. And so if you find the right place, yeah, you can find a lot of cool stuff. The sidewalk tear-outs, where they go into an old town and tear out the old sidewalks and put in new cement. If you can detect the dirt before they recover it. I was walking through a town in Michigan with a metal detector. They'd done sidewalk tear-outs. People were walking up and down the sidewalks while I was detecting. I could look down with my bare eyes and see Indian head pennies on the ground, laying on the ground, on the surface. I reached up, pick it up. Didn't require a detector, nothing. People were walking right by it. And 4 inches down, I was finding things like, I found a shield nickel. I found an 1876 nickel. I found a 1876 quarter, So you can find all kinds of cool stuff. Mark Heil, have you ever used the fishing magnet? Not to fish. I apologize. Mark sent me this industrial fishing magnet, and I've used it to pick up nails around construction sites, which it's great for. But not yet. I'm always worried I'm going to throw it in. It's going to get stuck on something, and it'll be gone. I don't know why that worries me. It does. ZenAX, what do you think about magnet fishing? I've seen people doing it. I've never done it myself. That's the thing. I don't really live near anything that would be probably that exciting. Oh, I could be wrong. John Ware, you've certainly heard about the couple that found millions in gold coins in California. There was the story, yeah, and in fact, there's a famous story, and I forgot the name of it, but a family, or I think it was a guy, but it may have been a man and a woman, were walking their own property and saw just something sticking out of the ground. They kicked it. It was the edge of a container filled with gold coins, and they took it someplace and they had them all graded, and then I think they auctioned them off and made a ton of money. But occasionally you hear about finds like that, and it's kind of crazy. So, Cold Lake Alta respects on Memorial Day to my American cousins from Canada. Lewis Browning Nokia Legend metal detector. Emmanuel Guerra, Steve, been a long time since we had the whiteboard. Yeah, the whiteboard, I know where it is. It's in my basement. It got moved a while back, and it's I'd have to remember to bring it in and then find markers and see the markers still work. And then we'll see. The problem with the whiteboard is that it screws up the settings on the camera. Matthew Shosman says, Steve, go to Detroit and find all kinds of stuff in the afternoon. They did some diving, right? So if you're familiar with Detroit, Woodward Avenue comes into downtown Detroit and dead ends into Jefferson. But if you kept going, you'd wind up in the Detroit River. And there's a sidewalk down there, and you can walk along the edge of the river, and the Detroit River is right there. And it's been there for a long time. Now, they've filled in portions of it. So the border of that river has moved a little bit. The bank of the river has moved a little bit. However, they've gone diving there, and they find all kinds of, they found cannons down there. They found cars down there, and they found all kinds of weapons of all sort. So, G-Vogue, what's a ton of money? A ton of money is a term of art. And Ghost Rider says 2,000 pounds, but that's not correct. It depends on the currency and the face value and so on. So, Troy Built says I have a 1912 and it's near impossible to get parts. You have to make them. I'm referring to a car from 1912. Drag Pack Merc says, is GM seriously thinking of bringing back Pontiac? Or is that all a weird joke? I had not heard that. I don't think so. Don't forget that General Motors at one point in time was adding brands like Saturn. And then that they finally, killed that. And then they had to kill off Pontiac. And then didn't they also kill off Oldsmobile? Oldsmobile? And the weird part about General Motors is they go through these phases where they'll be like, oh, let's make all these different cars because designers are cool. Then an accountant will come in and go, well, do we really have to make all these cars? Couldn't we just, I don't know, make them all on the same platform and give them different names? And you think about the mid 70s when they did that, where you could buy the exact same car from like 8 different nameplates. It's the same car with different trim and a different name. It's just stupid. So, and so there came a time where it was redundant to have all those different nameplates. So I don't know why they'd revive it, except that it had some cool history. Pontiac built some great cars, GTO, Trans Am. But General Motors also foolishly thought at one point in time they thought, see, a young man will buy a Camaro. And as he makes a little bit more for himself, maybe he'll move it up a little bit and buy himself a Buick. And then when he realizes he's making a little better, he'll want to step out a little bit. He'll get himself an Oldsmobile. See? And before that, though, he'll want to sow his wild oats in a Pontiac. And then when he makes it, he'll buy a Cadillac. And nobody ever did that. No one did that. What the car companies didn't realize until long after it was too late was that someone buys a Camaro when they're a kid and loves it so much they want to buy another Camaro when they're an adult. So instead of the used Camaro they had in high school, they want to buy a brand new one when they're older. And so people go back, and it's just funny how I've heard that stupid thing about the stair steps or the ladder steps, whatever they're going to call it, where you'll graduate from one car brand to the next, but you'll stay loyal to General Motors. Why? And it was some marketing idiot at General Motors that came up with that. It's like, that's not how people think. And all anybody ever had to do was simply look at car buying habits. and find some older guy who's buying a brand new Camaro and go, what was your earlier car? I had a Camaro years ago and I loved it. So now I'm stepping up. The Buick Skylark GSX. I had a brother who had a convertible Skylark Stage 1 convertible. It was not a GSX, but it was a cool car. Don't forget the 455 Buick motors put out a lot of torque. And of course, several people mentioned the Fieros, including 49453. The Fiero was an interesting car. Unfortunately, it's one of those cars that it had some early issues, and they fixed them out. They fixed them pretty quickly, but the reputation kept up with it to the point where people are like, oh, Fiero means fire, ha ha ha, and they catch on fire. And they had some earlier issues, and they had a couple different issues, but the Fiero was a very, very cool project. I liked it a lot. I never owned one. I know people who did who liked them, though. So Chris Sinclair says built-in obsolescence is what killed brand loyalty. Yeah, that mid-1970s sheet metal from Michigan. Oh, Brian Bloomer says a ton of gold is worth $56 million melt price today. Sounds about right. Mike D says Fiero is a girly car. Yeah, I can see that. So was that little T-Bird that Ford tried to revive. A friend of mine actually told me, Steve, I like that car. And I go, really? Doesn't look a little girlish to you? And he's like, you think so? And I'm like, I think so. But hey, that's just me. You drive whatever you want to drive. You can get it in powder blue. I won't make fun of you. Dan Boyd says the Fiero had the Iron Dork engine. The Iron Duke wasn't that bad. I know people complained about them. I actually had a car that had one in it that ran forever. You just can't overheat them. Whatever you do, don't overheat them. Don't overheat them. Whatever you do. SM Tiffany once owned a Buick Wildcat with a 445 Wildcat motor. Fun but hard to find parts for. Jeff Massey says Nova also had an identity crisis in Mexico, and there's an interesting story about that because they say that Nova is actually no go in Spanish, but that'd be no va. And it actually sold pretty well. And the question is, it's like if I told you I bought something that's, a notable set of furniture, would you go, oh, you got no table? You just said you got no table. And so people do process 2-syllable words differently than 2 1-syllable words next to each other. But Brad M73 says, I'm 6'4". I couldn't fit in a Fiero. I sat in a Fiero once or twice as a passenger in a Fiero, and they always seemed a bit crowded to me when I was in there. So Gilbert says they only came in white, red, and black at first. I think they may have added a color or two later, but I remember seeing those car haulers go by with just that smattering of 3 colors. But I can't make too much fun of that because the Viper most years only came in 2 colors. They may have changed a color every year, but only 2 colors. MHOA says Nova does not mean Nova. Exactly. Juan Alvarado says, what do you think on FCA getting rid of the Hemi? They can always bring it back, but, I'm not really sure what to make of FCA anymore anyway. That's a company that every couple of years announced the end of the Hellcat or equivalent. And then they go, oh, except we're going to put out one more double secret Hell Smoke edition with 19,000 horsepower and a special edition badge. And we're going to only sell 50 of them. This is it. Next year, they go, oh, we're putting out this loser leave town in a grudge match edition of the Hell Smoke Fire and Brimstone edition of the Hellcat with 25,000 horsepower. And we're only going to put out 75 of them. And guys are like, what? You said that was the last one. And they've done that so many times. It's like Lucy with a football. So I don't know. But I drove one of those Chargers. And I remember driving it going, I think they've tuned it to make it loud just to make it sound cool, which I think they did. But it didn't seem that powerful. It wasn't as powerful as it sounded. But what are you going to do? Believe in yourself as far as horsepower goes. Anything beyond 9,000 is fine. I'm purposely using hyperbolic numbers. 29,000 horsepower. You always hear about that, like when it comes to like how many horsepower was like the space shuttle, that kind of thing. 3 million horsepower. A bit of truth. Have you ever been part of or seen in court a particularly unusual directed verdict? I've seen a couple directed verdicts where I think the judge made a mistake. I've taken one up on appeal and got it reversed where the judge made a mistake. But I haven't, but in law school, we read cases, but none of them come to mind. But I remember reading a case once in law school where there was a lot of testimony about what somebody saw. And somebody said, I saw this happen. I'm a witness to it. And they were the most important person in the entire case. And there were all kinds of diagrams and maps that were described in the testimony. And on appeal, the court said, well, the judge directed the verdict at the close of the proofs because there was no way that that witness could see what they claimed they saw. And I went back and reread the portion where they described it repeatedly. And I'm like, I don't know that I get that from the record. And remember, the court goes off the record they've got before them. They don't go and ask the judge, well, why did you do this? They read the record. They read the record. They read the opinion. And so I'm looking at this, and it sounded to me more like a credibility issue. If somebody says, I saw it on cross-examination, you go, isn't it true you were standing over there and you couldn't see over there? But the court had said, based on the person saying they're standing here and the thing happening here, and there's a wall right here, they absolutely, as a matter of law, could not see it. And like I said, I didn't get that from reading the transcript. So I don't know, but I've seen that, I'm generally a firm believer that if there's a jury that spent all the time to get picked and sit there and take time off from work, let them decide. And then if they get it wrong, take that up on appeal. But you see how it goes. Zene asks, what do you think about how car companies now just change minor things in a car model from year to year and acting like it's a brand new model? That's been happening for years. In fact, there's some years you can barely tell the difference between two cars. And obviously, like actual overhauls of the body designs are fairly less common, but they got to do like trim the stuff and different decals and so on to make them look different. So a bit of truth, fascinating. Thanks for describing that example. Chris Sinclair, what's the most durable street legal vehicle you've ever researched? I'm not really sure. It's hard to say. I've owned a bunch of Ford Explorers, and I hate to talk about this, but I've never had one had a major breakdown on me, and I've owned them for a length of time. And I know people who say the same things about Ford trucks, but also I know that some of the other truck companies make great trucks also. So a lot of it does depend on how you handle the thing and how you treat it. So Mark Miller, Steve, EcoBoost or 5.0? I'd go for the 5.0 because EcoBoost, of course, is a little more complicated. And I think you're putting more stress on the engine when you're calling up those extra horses. About SM Tiffin, hey, Steve, big shout out to my daughter who just recently received her JD from Seattle Law, has already worked on an amicus brief that was heard by SCOTUS. Wow, congratulations. That is fantastic. We need a GoFund for your chair in the background. I love scotch. I wasn't going to address the chair today, but I will because people ask. I purposely use a chair that I won't move or rock in. So it needs to be a simple chair. I sit on it, I lean back, and it doesn't move. That's what I need. So I'm sitting in a better chair here, but if I was sitting on camera right now, I'd be doing this, and that would annoy you. So someone said they're going up north. How do I say Toivola again? Toivola. And it is a Finnish word, and it's the name of a town not far from, I think, over near Tri Mountain. And Toivola, the Finns tend to accent the first syllable of a word. So Toivola, not Toivola. Toivola. So there you go. Dan Boyd says, I'm sitting in a similar chair. And Gilbert says, if you watch closely, Steve is bouncing his right leg all the time, and I am right now, and I have been all day. I just want to know how you can see down there. Joel Raleigh, Steve, doesn't that chair have the ability to lock? Probably. But then the other thing is also this would be on camera. The headrest would be. And it's like it blocks stuff behind me. I've thought this stuff through. I know you guys are worried about me. You want me to be sitting in a comfortable chair. Stop. I've never complained about the chair and I never will. So, Daniel Kester, what issues could come up if someone designed and built their own car? Well, it depends. If you sell them to other people, you got to worry about the liability of people crashing and saying that your car was built substandard. And if you built enough of them, you'd have to do all kinds of stuff like go through crash standards and emissions standards and all that stuff. And so it could be very, very expensive. And MH08 says, can't block the hundo. And Sad Tiger says, not the chair again. See, I was going to tell you that there's like 5 topics I will not talk about. And I just decided the chair, the $100 bill, and there's a couple I get asked every single time. And it's like, the bulk of you are like, stop asking that question. So, are we there yet? I'm in Helsinki. Found your channel the other day because I watch, and the message got retracted while I was reading it. Oh, Dougie Doo says, Steve, do you mow your own lawn or hire it? I enjoy mowing, but not when it hits 100 degrees. I mow my own lawn, and I've got a riding mower. And here's the thing: when I was a kid and I did a walk behind, that was a pain. I mowed lawns for all kinds of people, and they paid me, so I was fine. That's how I made spending money as a teenager. That and a paper route. But now I've got a riding mower, and it seems like I'm zooming around the yard in this thing. It's cool. It's like driving. It changes my attitude on mowing lawns. So like, as long as I got time, and that's one way I relax. I'll go out and mow the lawn for a little while. Whatever. Mark Miller says the Department of Redundancy Department. There you go. David Peterson says you need to do one episode in a high wingback chair, be like Masterpiece Theater. I would need a pipe though, wouldn't I? Wouldn't I occasionally just pause and like look off in the distance? Gilbert says put headlights on and mow at night. I think my tractor does have a light on the front, but I'm always worried about running stuff over. And by the way, about once a year, I send my tractor in for maintenance. And they go, what do you want done to it? And I go, everything. And the first time I said that, the guy goes, well, I go, no, everything. And I went in to pick it up, and the guy goes, we had to replace your blades. And I go, it doesn't surprise me. And the guy goes, oh, some people object. And I go, no. He pulls them out, and they're all, occasionally I run stuff over, okay? So it's a wear item. In my mind, the blades, the belts, the filters are all wear items, okay? My last tractor, I broke the deck on a couple times. That was harder to explain as a wear item, but I'm going to wrap it up right now because I just realized it's past 3 o'clock. We've been here for 2 hours. I think the Indy 500 is on. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But anyway, I will talk to you guys soon, as always, on my main channel, also on the Vault. And I'll try to do this again next Sunday, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Otherwise, watch the community tab on YouTube. I do post it there the morning of to let you know that it's coming. Until then, you guys behave yourself. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.